Hi everyone, welcome to today's professional learning. Again, I thank you all for your hard work that you have done to support the children in our center. Today we gather here is to talk about inclusive practice. Firstly, what does inclusion mean to you? Think about the word include. What does it tell you? Include means to contain or comprise as part of a whole. What does it mean in our workplace? Include is everyone as a part and all together to make a whole. Where and when do we find inclusion the most, and why? Put that in mind and think about the connection between these two questions. For me and most of the people think, inclusion is to accept and respect differences, embracing all people regardless of races, genders, disabilities, or different abilities. What does inclusive practices mean to you, or to all the teachers and educators? According to United Nations Education, Scientific and Cultural Organization, defines that inclusive education is a process of strengthening the capacity of the education system to reach out to all learners and can thus be understood as a key strategy to achieve education for all. Regarding that statement, in order to become inclusive education system, all schools should first be inclusive so that all schools will become better at educating all students, which is in creating welcoming communities and environments and developing an inclusive society, and to achieve education for all. It is also about giving equal access and opportunities without discrimination and intolerance for all the students to learn the same knowledge and understanding in the same environment. Like other society, childcare and centers also operate under rules, regulation, laws, and established convention. This is to promote stability and equity among others in the society. So what are the rules or regulations that first come to your mind? Perhaps there are Australian Human Rights Commission Act, Disability Discrimination Act, and Disability Standard Education. All of these are the regulations that we need to discuss today when we come to diversity. Apart from these laws and regulations, there are also NCCD, which stands for the National Consistent Collection of Data, Convention on the Rights of the Child, and Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So what are these laws and how does it impact us? So Australian Human Rights Commission Act, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and the Convention on the Rights of the Child are pretty much the same in regards to education. In the very beginning, it stated that all human beings are entitled to all the rights that set forth in this declaration without difference in race, age, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, and national or social origin status. Regarding to diversity in education, it stated that every child or everyone has the right to express their opinions, to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas of all kinds regardless of frontier, to be treated equality, to access public services, and to receive education. In Disability Discrimination Act, which mainly focuses on disability students and communities, according to this act, it is against the law for an educational authority to discriminate a child with disabilities. Disability in this context are referring to cognitive, physical, psychiatric, neurological, and sensory difficulties. This act also extends to protect the family or friends for those who are being treated unfairly due to the relationship with the disability people. Besides, in this act, it has an extra condition that allows discrimination. It is when it comes to constitute unjustifiable hardship, discrimination is permissible. When discrimination in regard to education, it is classified as unjustifiable hardship. And to elaborate this point, the disability standards for education is produced. Teacher or school who act accordance to the standard, they will not breach the Disability Discrimination Act. So in disability standards for education, it focuses about 5 aspects for schools and teachers, which are enrollment, participation, curriculum, development, accreditation and delivery, student support services, and elimination of harassment and victimization. For the National Consistent Collection of Data, It is underpinned by two legislation, which are Disability Discrimination Act and Disability Standards for Education. It is an organization that collects data about school students with disability who are receiving adjustment across Australia in a consistent, reliable, and systematic way. It enables schools, education authorities, and government to better understand the needs of students with disability and how they can be best supported at school. So it is our responsibility to report the collected data to this organization. In our workplace, as we know, we are a private-owned childcare center that accommodates 75 children every day. Due to the location of our childcare center, we have children mostly from different cultural backgrounds and with different abilities, which make this childcare center into a diversified environment. At this stage, we have 4 children with physical disability and with 2 needed wheelchair facilities, and the other 2 with hearing and vision impairment. Besides, we also have a few potential gifted children that have yet to be assessed. All of these make a big picture of diversity. It is a great opportunity for us, the educators and teachers, to learn how to effectively implement our inclusion practices in this environment. However, in another hand, it is also a huge challenge for us. So how does inclusive practice look like in our situation in regard with the regulation and laws? There will be creating welcoming and diverse environment, for example, with wheelchair access facilities, respect and embrace all children and families, have posters about diversity with written and visual representation that are easy to understand for children and families, or the instruction or information for the children should have visual, oral, and written presentation. Make adjustment in differentiating the curriculum to suit all learners, and create meaningful learning environment that enhance children learning. So as for gifted children, what is gifted or talented? From what informs you these children are gifted or talented? According to Gane differentiated model of giftedness and talent, who define gifted students are those who has outstanding potential in one or more of the following domains of human ability, which are intellectual, creative, social, physical. But as for talented students, they are those who has high achievement or performance in academic at a level significantly beyond what might be expected at their age. So what are the characteristics for gifted students? In cognitive perspective, students may have the ability to understand and use abstract symbol system, have early language model and vocabulary development, unusual facility with numbers, exceptional memory, rapid pace of learning, the ability to ask reflective and probing questions, and the early development of classifying and investigating skills. So as for affective characteristics of gifted children, they have unusually well-developed sense of justice and fairness. They are emotional intensity. They often play interests that are more like those of older children. They prefer the companionship of children in a little bit older or sometimes more years older. And they have enhanced capacity to empathize with the feelings of others, and they can sometimes become very frustrated when their imperfect fine motor coordination won't allow them to produce artwork or writing at a level they can envisage in their imagination. So what other identification process can we follow? So from Mary Target is that from the nomination, assessment or identification, appropriate curriculum differentiation or program, evaluation and continued identification and definition of program. So when assessing gifted children, it is important that we use multiple measuring tools that include a combination of objective and subjective measurement, according to Merritt and Target. For subjective measure, which is a qualitative measure, that are usually in anecdotal record that completed by teachers and parents through everyday observation. And for objective measure, which is a quantitative measure, there are usually standardized tests for students' ability and achievement. The measures include IQ tests and other forms of psychometric testing, standardized performance tests, dynamic testing, and off-level testing. In order to have an effective identification, it is essential to have both objective and subjective measurement. After you have identified the gifted children within your care, the next step is to provide appropriate curriculum differentiated program for them. All students deserve equitable access to an engaging and rigorous curriculum, said Tomlinson and Jervis. So according to Landrum and McDuffie, define the differentiated instruction is a pedagogical approach with design to teach and promote learning across students who have different readiness levels, interests, and modes of learning in the same classroom. Therefore, to apply differentiated instruction framework, you need to know your student. In Australian Institute of Teaching and School Leadership Standard, in Standard 1 is stated to know your student and how they learned. So you have to know their background, for example, their life experiences, prior knowledge, socio-economic, cultural background, their needs, their strengths and abilities, their interests, their level of learning such as their readiness in learning, and their preferred modes of learning. Then you will be able to plan personalized learning experiences, creating opportunity for regular and quality feedback that focus on learning goals and be flexible in teaching. It sounds like individualizing learning or designing unique learning experience for every student, but it is actually about making adjustment or modification in learning experience that meets the needs, strengths, and interests of students. Therefore, in order to be successful in providing effective differentiated learning, knowing every student's interests and strengths to address their needs are essential. And for gifted and talented children, differentiation is modifying the regular curriculum by altering process, skills, and content and learning environment to suit gifted and talented students. Therefore, the learning experience needs to be modified or enriched to broaden curriculum to improve student skills and abilities to a degree of intricacy that equates with their cognitive abilities. After you have a sound understanding of your student, especially for gifted students, you would be able to apply the differentiated strategies, which are the content, process, product, and learning environment into your planning effectively. So content is what you taught. So you could make adjustment to the content described in the curriculum framework documents such as Early Years Learning Framework or Australian Curriculum. So for process is how learning will occur. This is where you to apply your teaching strategies, for example, explicit teaching, gradual release of responsibility, inquiry learning, collaborative learning, thinking routine, or reflective process. As for gifted children, you need to use strategies that involve higher order thinking, problem solving, and a focus on critical and creative thinking and choice. And for product is the evidence of student learning. This is where you would expect what your students' learning outcomes should be. As having differentiated learning tasks, students are expected to have different product generated. Learning, and the last is learning environment. This is where learning takes place. It is where you create a meaningful learning environment for all students. For instance, having outdoor learning environment, flexible grouping arrangement, and using online or visual environment to enhance learning for gifted students. In conclusion, implementation of inclusive practice is important, and also it is our obligation to create and maintain an inclusive environment for children, families, and colleagues.